Hi, I'm Will. If you want to learn Next.js's app router to understand things like pages, routes, dynamic routes, route handling, data fetching, layouts, and linking techniques associated with that, then you've come to the right place. By the way, that is a mouthful. In this tutorial, we're going to run through setting up a simple blog navigation to understand how all of these will be used in practice. Now, if you need help setting up or installing Next.js, check out the previous tutorial. The link is in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like the content, and let's get to it. If you haven't already, start a development server with Yarn Dev or a package manager of your choice like npm. To use Next.js's app router, create an app folder in the source or root of the project if it doesn't already exist. If the project was created with create next app, then this is already created for you. Note that if you're using Next.js's old page router, you can use them both at the same time and incrementally migrate over. Let's get into creating our first page. Let's say we want to create a home page or a page without a path. Let's create a page.tsx file inside of the app directory, or simply open it if create next app has already generated it. To render stuff on this page, we're going to export a default function. I'm going to call it homepage. The name doesn't need to be specific. The important part is that it's a default export. Once we've done that, I'm going to render out some content in h1 tags just to make sure that it's working. Hit save, go to the root URL of the development server, which should be localhost 3000 by default, and you should get the content that we've just output on the page. If the project was created with create next app, there might be some funny background going on, so we can delete that in the global CSS. Next up, let's create a page on a website that does have a path, like a /contact page. To create a new /contact route for our page, create a contact folder inside of the app folder. Create a page.tsx file inside of that newly created folder and open it up. Export a default function. I'm going to call this one contact page. I'm going to render out some content just so we can see it. Save the changes. Go to the web browser. Go to /contact on the site, and we should see the content that we've just told it to output. Let's say we have a collection of content, like a blog, for example, and each blog article uses the same code, but it has different content. We can create each different route and add the code, or we can use a dynamic route. Dynamic routes pass segments of the URL, the path, to the route function, and with this we can use that to query a CMS, a database, or other services to get the content. To create a dynamic route, create a folder in the app directory called blog, and inside of that folder create another folder called slug with the name in square brackets. Create a page.tsx file inside of the slug folder, open this up, export a default function, and call this blog post. For now, we're going to output the same text for anything that the dynamic route renders. Hit save changes and go to the browser. Go to /blog/test path and then /blog/second test path. Both of these should render the same content. Since dynamic routes usually render different content on different pages, we'll want some way to identify each different page. Some unique identifier. The folder with the name slug in square brackets tells Next.js to pass the path segment to our function inside of the props with the name slug. Using params and then slug inside of our page properties, we can use the value. For now, we're just going to output it to our page content. Go to blog/test path and then blog/another path, just to check to make sure that our slug is being output correctly to the browser. Now we've got a unique identifier, let's create a mock API to mock out some backend service or some API that we would normally use to grab this information. To create a mock API, we're going to use Next.js's route handlers, and we're going to pass in our slug via URL query parameters rather than using the path segments we've been using beforehand. Create an API folder inside of the app folder, and inside of the API folder, create a blog-post folder. Then create a root.ts file inside of the blog-post folder. Export a function called get from that file to tell Next.js this handles HTTP GET requests. Other HTTP methods like POST are supported and are listed on Next.js's website. This GET function has passed a request object that contains the URL. Let's start by getting the search query parameters from that URL. Next, we need to get the data from somewhere. And for simplicity, I'm going to use a mockdb object just to query what we need, instead of actually setting up a database or a CMS or some other kind of service. The mockdb object is going to use the slug as the keys for the object, and the values for those keys are going to be the page data for the blogs. For the purposes of this tutorial, the blog object is just going to be a title. Now, you normally have the author and the blog content there, and you probably also want to connect it to a CMS or something else, but again, simplicity, we'll keep it to this. The return type of this object is either going to return the blog items with all of the page information, or it's going to be undefined. So that's the type that we're going to set. We want to query this mockdb object, and we're going to call a function to do that. But because Next.js can also pass null as the slug query param, then we're going to use nullish coalescing just to pass in an empty string, which will give us undefined. And that's okay because we know then it doesn't exist. Since the mockdb object can return undefined, i.e. there's no blog data to send back, then we want to handle that. So what we'll do is send back a lovely 404 not found error message to our users to make sure that they know that it's not there. And finally, we want to send back the information in a JSON format because machines can read JSON easily. So Next.js gives us a nextResponse.json function that we can use, which will package it up for us. It's worth mentioning that because we're using the request object, it's opting out of caching in Next.js. So this particular path will always return fresh data if you have a CMS or some other data changing mechanism behind the hood. Now, we're not doing that, but it's worth noting because if you don't do that, then you will cache the response when it gets compiled and you'll always return the same data. Save the changes, head over to the browser, go to API/blog post with the slug query parameter as test path. That should return our JSON object. Now, if we query something else that doesn't exist, for example, like, I don't know, the query parameter as bad slug, then that's going to return a 404, which is exactly what we want. Let's head over to the blog post page file and use this new API to power our blog posts. To make a network request with our blog post page, let's convert it to an asynchronous function first. Next, let's fetch the data from the API route that we've just created. Mine's at localhost 3000. Make sure you use backticks here so the template literal works. In case we don't get a blog post, what we want to do is pass on that 404 error. So let's return a 404 here. If we do get a blog post, we want to pass that as JSON so we can use the information. To tell TypeScript what we're working with, let's create a blog post data type and cast our response as that. Finally, let's show the title as the page content. Save, head over to the browser, visit a slug that exists in our mockdb so that we can get the page content, and that should render. If you visit something else that doesn't exist, you should get a 404. Next up is linking or adding links, so our users don't have to manually type out the URL each time and they can click on a link. Much more user-friendly. Links are crucial for users to be able to navigate between different pages, and if we leverage Next.js layouts, it's going to make our job a little less repetitive, especially when it comes down to links that should be shown on every page, like an avbar. Layouts in Next.js apply code structure to all of the files that are nested beneath them, unless another file in the hierarchy that's a layout is nested above it. Create a file called layout.tsx in the app folder. If you're using Create Next app, that may have been generated for you. If you're not using Create Next app, copy the code shown on the screen at the moment. This is just a general scaffolding, and this can be edited to suit our needs. Now we've got the layout or the bare bones of it, let's jump into linking. In its simplest form, we can add links to our project by using Next.js's link component and then using that component with a href to the destination we want it to go to. The documentation for the component and lots of other options can be found on Next.js's website. Let's start by adding links to the home and contact pages with a simple bullet point between them just to add a bit of separation. Hit save, visit the pages, and check out the very simple navigation. For completeness, let's list all of the blog page posts to the home page so people can navigate to them. Go to the blog post root and extract the mockdb that we created earlier, the constant, to a mockdb TS file. Then import this and replace the mockdb in the root file. Create a new root in the API folder called blog posts, and inside of that, a new root.ts. This is going to return an array of all of our blog posts. Import the mockdb, and we're going to change it from an object into an array with the slug in it, so it's easy for users or consumers of the API to iterate through all of those blog posts. It's worth noting that the response of this API will be cached because we're not using the request object inside of the root. Let's go back to the mockdb and add a few more entries in so we've got a little bit more of a list to show on our home page. Let's go back to our home page and let's amend it so that we can call our new API, get this list, and then iterate through this list all of the links to those blog posts and show the title of each blog post on each link. Okay, save that, go to the home page, and you should see a list of all of those blog articles with the links going to the pages. And if you click on them, they'll lead to the pages. And that's it. That's all of the links going to all of the pages that we created for all of the routes. And that's it. That's the Next.js app router covered. From here, you could go on to add more fields to the blog entities, style the pages, hook it up to a CMS, and create a fully fledged blog, or something entirely different. It's up to you. Now, if you've got any requests, queries, errors, or feedback, please drop a comment in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of content. And until next time, never glitch. See you later.